So we're going to continue our discussion of the benefits of having a computer network in place. I know that we talked about this a bit in our previous lectures, but I want to continue this discussion, and I'm going to talk about some more tangible benefits in regards to from an IT perspective and a business perspective. So prior to having computer networks in place, there were computers, and before we had networks in place, computers could not communicate and transfer data from one to the other. And so when you did that, when you had to transfer data from one device to the other, you had to transport that on a floppy drive. And so you remember the days, for those of you that are older like me, you'll remember the days when we had to take our data, we had to put a floppy drive in, and it really didn't hold much data at all. We had to copy that information onto the floppy, take it to the other device, and copy that onto its hard drive. And so that was time consuming, and it was slow, and it was labor intensive. And we can even go back further. They even had punch card coding. So my dad tells me stories back when he was in college where they were doing coding and they were doing programming, they were doing it on punch cards and putting it into the mainframe. So it was much slower than it is today and was very labor intensive. So now let's talk about the benefits of networking. Well, the first thing is centralized file management benefits. And if you think about this from an IT perspective, we can have a centralized file server in place for our organization, for our business, that stores all of our data, and it's available to everybody whenever we need them to have it. In the past, without a network, this would not even be a possibility. And when we have this in place and we have a network in place, we have shared resource capabilities. So we can easily share information on this file server from one person to the other. Or even if we have somebody on their client desktop and they need to share information, they can share that to somebody else on the network. Now, another great thing about having a network in place is that we can have centralized security and configuration management set up. And so for those of you that are new to IT, you'll understand this from the perspective where you go to work and you log in. You have to set up that first day, you have to set up a username, or the IT department sets up a username and they establish the password, and you have to use that username and password to log into the computer. And you may not be able to log in before 8 a.m. and you may not be able to log in after 5 p.m. And they also may set restrictions on what you can access and what you can't access. And so from that perspective, we have centralized security and configuration management in place. And then also the concept of just having increased speed. So taking this perspective where we didn't have networks in place, where we had to manually transfer data from one computer to the other, or we had to actually take information and print it off on the printer and hand it to the other person, comparing that to when we have computer networks in place now, we have greatly increased speeds. And if you think about it, and really think about it from the perspective of an organization, if you think about all this, central file management benefits, shared resource capabilities, centralized security and configuration management benefits, and increased speeds, well, what does this lead to for an organization and a business? Well, number one, we're going to have greater productivity overall because we're much more efficient. And because things happen faster and we're using less resources and we're much more efficient overall, we're going to have cost savings. And so, the end goal, if you're thinking about it from the perspective of a business, we have greater productivity and we have cost savings. And so that concludes our lecture on the benefits of networking.